Hello again, friends, and welcome into another edition of Wrestling with Rusty right here on YouTube for September the 5th, 2022. On today's edition of Wrestling with Rusty, I want to review the AEW All Elite Wrestling Media Scrum from All Out from last night. Not the All Out pay-per-view in which CM Punk becomes world champion again for the second time, but the media scrum where they talk to the media reporters and things of that nature. At that scrum, CM Punk talks about his past relationship and falling out with Scott Colton, better known in wrestling as Colt Cabana. Um, Scott Colton being the real name. And Colt Cabana, really, I have never met the guy, but I know people that do, that are very close friends to him. And Colt Cabana is just not a nice guy and makes fun of the wrestling business. So I don't have any respect for Colt Cabana. But I do think that CM Punk bringing that out and saying all that was inappropriate at that media scrum. Excuse me. Especially since it was supposed to be about the pay-per-view last night and not past things to do with Colt Cabana. However, sorry. Forgive me. I apologize. But the one thing I found interesting is for weeks now, the AEW locker room, it has been in shambles. I think it started months ago when Cody Rhodes left for WWE, but I think it got worse over the past few weeks, in which CM Punk calls out Hangman Adam Page for being unprofessional and spreading rumors about the Colt Cabana issue. And also calls out the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, for doing the same. The one thing I find interesting is Jim Cornette calls the Young Bucks the Hardly Boys, not Hardy Boys, but Hardly, as in hardly can wrestle. So the Hardly Boys spread rumors about the Colt Cabana thing, and so does Adam Page. Adam Page goes on to say at a local wrestling school workshop somewhere a few weeks back that he doesn't take suggestions from anyone, not even from veterans such as Arn Anderson and others, and that upset CM Punk when he heard that. I don't think that was the right time to bring that out as well, but I do think CM Punk was in the right bringing up the part about the Young Bucks and spreading the lies. As CM Punk said, who CM Punk is friends with or not friends with in terms of Colt Cabana or anybody else is nobody else's business but CM Punk. And I think the Young Bucks were just purposely trying to start trouble. I know the Young Bucks are friends with Colt Cabana, and I know that Adam Page is friends with the Young Bucks and Colt Cabana. So I know they were probably trying to just stand up for their friend. But by the same token, these people have to learn that the company and the company's wishes come first. And if they can't do that, then they need to be fired immediately from All Elite Wrestling. Many years ago, people used to chastise Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, for being the booker of Jim Crockett Promotions. And I was one of those that did that. And the reason I did that is Dusty Rhodes was a hell of an on-air talent and a hell of a wrestler and a legend in this business. But Virgil Runnels, the real-life persona, or the real-life man, not the Dusty Rhodes persona of Dusty Rhodes, Virgil Runnels, was the booker of Jim Crockett Promotions. So when you have somebody booking matches and dealing with talent but then trying to be talent themselves on air, it never works. And that was back in 1988. And I'm sure it never worked before that with other people. So those who fail to learn from history are destined to repeat it. And Tony Khan, the owner of AEW, calls himself a historian. Well, obviously, he never learned that you cannot have people that are going to be on air working behind the scenes at the same time. It never works because the on-air people tend to push themselves and their friends instead of doing what's best for the company. And that currently is what is happening in AEW, and therefore causing all these problems in AEW, causing WWE to rise up a little bit. And WWE even counter-programmed their pay-per-view, whatever it was named, against AEW All Out, although WWE was at 4 p.m. Eastern and AEW was at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. Having said all that, as a side note, MJF returns. Maxwell Jacob Friedman, MJF, returns to All Out to set up a feud between himself and CM Punk down the road. Obviously, MJF is headed for the AEW World title and should be AEW World title champion by November at the latest, I would presume. But back to the media scrum part. I just think that while CM Punk had a right to say what he said, I think Tony Khan, again, is letting the inmates run the asylum. Tony Khan might be the boss, but he is not being the boss. Therefore, that is why all these people are against one another. And regardless of how much I hate the Young Bucks and how much I'm starting not to like Adam Page, the truth of the matter is all this fussing and fighting cannot do anything to help AEW in the short term or the long term. So it needs to be squashed, and it needs to be squashed now. As of a few hours ago, Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful.com and FightfulSelect.com, their premium website for $5 a month, said that CM Punk was confronted by the Young Bucks backstage after the media scrum about what CM Punk had said. CM Punk had said during the media scrum, "If you have a problem with me, come find me, let's go." Well, apparently, the Young Bucks went to find CM Punk, and CM Punk apparently threw the first punches in a fight against the Young Bucks. Having said that, is Tony Khan now going to have the balls to suspend CM Punk for throwing those punches when he suspended Eddie Kingston a few weeks back for throwing a pie in the face of Sammy Guevara, to where no punches were thrown, but Eddie Kingston was suspended for a couple of weeks? Well, since punches were thrown in this case, is CM Punk, the AEW World Champion, going to get suspended? I think he should, so that they could send a message to the AEW locker room that you're either for AEW and not for yourself, or get out. But I honestly don't think he will be suspended. I think they will make some excuse not to suspend CM Punk, even though they should suspend CM Punk. Having said that, the inmates are running the asylum. WWE is starting to get a little bit better. So I've heard. I don't watch WWE, and I'll never watch WWE again, because WWE claims not to be wrestling, even though they've started saying wrestling on their programs. So I'll never watch WWE again, unless it's a Legends night, maybe. But that being said, AEW, as I've said since 2019, AEW was supposed to be an alternative to the WWE. AEW was going to be a sports-based pro wrestling presentation, much like old school NWA. However, shortly after AEW started in 2019, it was clear that Tony Khan lied and was more interested in doing what the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega think is wrestling, which is the jumping around and gymnastics routine, instead of old school sports based professional wrestling. So that's why I don't watch AEW. The only reason I'm reporting on this media scrum is because of all the activity that happened during the media scrum and the fight after the media scrum. The media scrum itself is on YouTube, and it's titled AEW Media Scrum. Some of the titles also, because it's uploaded there several times by several different people. Some of the other titles are CM Punk Blast, Colt Cabana, and AEW Media Scrum. So you can find it either way. Go check it out for yourself. Don't just take my word for it. But the bottom line here is the inmates are running the asylum. Tony Khan does not have control of his locker room. He's paying a bunch of people millions of dollars, but they are telling him what to do. He is not telling them what to do. And I hate to agree with Vince McMahon, but this kind of stuff would have never went on in Vince McMahon's locker room. If you do this kind of stuff, if it was Vince McMahon, you would have been told to get the hell out. But Tony Khan is too worried about being somebody's friend instead of being their boss. So more details as they become available right here on Wrestling with Rusty. It looks like it's going to get worse before it gets any better. And AEW is in serious trouble. But then again, they were in serious trouble going all the way back to 2019 when they lied to wrestling fans and said it's going to be a realistic sports-based pro wrestling presentation like old school. And it never was. That's why I'll never forgive them. And I realized the only time you get realistic old school pro wrestling is when you watch NWA, ran by Billy Corgan. You're certainly not going to get it from AEW, as promised, and you're certainly not going to get it from WWE, the sports entertainment bullshit. That's going to do it for me, Rusty. I'm out of here. We'll see you next time for another edition of Wrestling with Rusty, right here on YouTube. And until we meet again, my friends, happy wrestling, everybody.